Out of what?
I didn't pick up on that.
I would like to call the City Council meeting to order. Please stand and salute our American flag, led by Councilor Lippman.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Councilor Doyle?
Here.
Councilor Littman?
Present.
Councilor Bear?
Present.
Councilor Hamel?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Armin Baldwin?
Here. With us also this evening, we have our city manager, Scott Myers, and our financial director, Donna Wooderman. Everyone is present that is here. We also have in the audience our Public Works Director, Wes Anderson, and I don't see the police chief here tonight, so he's probably got something more important than to be here. Next on the agenda is the acceptance of the previous minutes of the meeting. Has everybody had a chance to go over them? And are there any corrections or anything anybody sees that are different? Okay, we don't have to accept them, so the minutes are accepted as presented. Okay, request to authorize the boat dealers, the business conducting watercraft activities, to act as agents of the city for the purpose of registering boats and watercraft. You all have that in front of you, I'm sure. We need a motion. The motion would be to move to approve, authorize Paugus Bay Marina, Thurston Marina, Channel Marine, Irwin Marine, Lakeport Landing, and Watermark Marine to act as agents of the city for the purpose of collecting boat registration fees.
So moved.
So moved by Councilor Bear and seconded by Councilor Hamel. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. All right. Item 2 is temporary traffic order 2017-2, Laconia Little League Opening Day Parade. And we have the motion here that to move to approve the temporary traffic order 2017-2, Laconia Little League Opening Day Parade as presented.
So moved.
So moved by Councilor Bear. We'll have a second by Councilor Doyle. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand. Motion carries. Citizen comments for matters not on tonight's agenda. Is it anywhere on our agenda does someone wish to come? Yes, sir.
Yes, Mayor.
Please state your name and
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Councilor Bolduc. My name is Cal Dunn. I reside at 217 Garfield Street in Laconia. I wanted to briefly discuss with the board here, the councilors, the city's evidently current policy on sanding and plowing that's changed. We never received any notification, and you know, we have limited services now. After 42 years, they decided, according to Mr. Anderson, not to continue to sand the hill at the end of Garfield Street. So, if I may just take a while, I'd like to, I have just basically 4 different categories I'd like to go through here, and if I may, pass out some city maps, and so you'll be more familiar with it.
to the secretary, Jill.
And I think I have enough to go down this way.
Okay.
I'd like to just take a moment to discuss the history of this. As you can note on the city map, Garfield Street runs down past the intersection of Tilton Avenue, and then there's a brook which it crosses. And then that road ends and becomes a private road. Now, in the late 50s, early 60s, the city plowed and sanded up to 204 Garfield Street. I don't know if you can make it out, but it would be the second house once you cross the brook. Can you identify? It's lot 20?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so like I said, in the early 60s, late 50s, the city plowed and sanded. They turned around in a small, inadequate driveway in the middle of the hill. In the mid-70s, 75, I developed on Lot A and have resided since then. And at that time, I talked to Frank DeNormandy, which was the director, and illustrated my concerns about the hill with the sand. And we discussed it, and he was aware that they plowed up to 204, and that there was several complaints with the drivers. It was a 12-foot driveway at that time. It was very difficult to turn around. So he agreed with me if I would maintain the plowing from the brook up, that the city would run the sand truck up to the hill, which would be, it turns around in front of the garage, which is 228 on Lot 21. And that has persisted for 42 years. Now, mind you, this is just the sanding. There is no road maintenance. I built the road, I paved the road, I fill the potholes, I resurface, and I plow. Solely the sanding. And then, without any notice, the sand truck discontinued coming up on the weekend of the 18th when we had a foot of snow. I thought it was probably a different driver, a new driver or something. And then Sunday, we had the rain, the 19th, and it was a sheet of ice. It just impossible to get down that hill. So Monday, I had called and spoke. I wasn't aware that Paul Monahan had retired, and it's evident now. And Wes Anderson had taken his place. And he informed me that they're no longer going to do any private right-of-ways, and, there's no notice given. And I must say, I find that very distasteful with the city. They're acting like small, immature children here. I mean, not to give the taxpayer notice of any discontinuing of the services for any reason at all. And a week before Christmas, it doesn't give one much ability to make arrangements for alterations, for differences. So, in discussion with Mr. Anderson, he informed me that none of his men are aware of ever going up there. Is that still the case?
Mr. Anderson's behind you.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Is that still the case?
You should just be.
I just asked a question.
Council has to ask me to answer it, so if I...
Wait, finish your discussions and then we'll...
Okay. Well, I guess there's some argument on whether or not there was any sanding at all, according to Mr. Anderson, which is also, very shady. I mean, there is 20 to 30 witnesses that I could bring back dating to 75 that have witnessed the sand truck come up the hill at various times during the day, at any time it was necessary. So, moving on, I don't think there's any argument there that they have done it. I can bring in Paul Monahan. I doubt very much that honorable man would lie. So, with the obligation I feel to the city, due to the severity, this is just not a convenience. This is a necessity. And due to the inconvenience and the non-sanding of the hill, the trash didn't come up last Friday, and the trash still remains out in the yard, which poses a inconvenience and a safety hazard, which I'm entitled to as a taxpayer, the curbside pickup. It also hinders the emergency vehicles such as ambulance and fire at limited times. They'd never be able to make access of that road. And with the obligation, my tax rate is no different than anybody else's, the land evaluation on Garfield Street. So in essence, I've been paying taxes for plowing and sanding right along. There's been no deduction for no services and stuff in the evaluation on the land. I'd like to spend just a minute moving on to the third item with the cost. I think this is just really ludicrous. We're talking 350 feet of roadway, and I have DOT applications of sand and salt which illustrate a 24-foot wide roadway, which my private roadway is no wider than that. A mile long, the application is 400 pounds of sand. If you would take 350 feet, bear with me, just do a little math, 350 feet times 10 to 12 storms a year, say 12, it's 4,200 feet, less than a mile. So we're talking 400 pounds for a season, and screened winter sand costs $6 a ton. A quarter of a ton is 500 pounds. Let's go with that for easy figuring. The cost to the city is $1.50 per season. And with the 3 residences on that hill, this is just not the Dunn compound. There are three residences, one of which my wife and I reside in only 8 months a year. Tonight we're leaving, headed to our winter home, but the taxes continue and the sewer bill does, and I've never complained until now. And Mr. Stone resides in 220, and Lisa Dregier resides in 204. So, in essence, this is a public right-of-way. It may not be a public accepted right-of-way by the city, but it's not just somebody's driveway. And lastly, I'd like to discuss, the responsibility to the city. The responsibility lies in its hazard. First off, if you will notice, there is no turnaround at the end of Garfield Street. And it behooves me that they stop the services up my hill, and in a vile manner, I may add, because it's a private roadway. But the city, I've witnessed on several occasions since then, will turn around at the end of the road on my property. So, I mean, what's good for one's good for the other, isn't it? I mean, if you're not going to enter on my property, stay the hell off it. Find some other way to turn a 40-foot truck around in an 18-foot paved roadway. And I mentioned the safety factor and the fact that it's a public use. There's 3 individual residents there. I just don't know how to resolve this issue. If the city had come to me, I think most of you know from my demeanor in the past and the family's actions, speaking mainly of my father, if I would have had any idea that the city was in such dire straits, I would have donated 20 yards of sand to do what they may with it. But again, I must emphasize that according to an RSA state law, number 1, it's illegal to stop services that have been provided to the taxpayer, whether it's just or not, or a private road. 42 years consummates the maintenance of sanding. It is accepted and has been by the city by that very fact. And secondly, something needs to be done with this turnaround. I notified Mr. Myers of this issue, where they were still entering my property and turning around on the road after they discontinued coming up the hill. And I noticed now they back in from Tilton Avenue, which for 170, 200 feet poses an extreme safety hazard. But they stop at the brook. If you notice, it comes to a pie shape, and right to the tip of that point is a city road, and I expect that maintained right to there. So I leave it up to the council for discussion, but I think this is a severe can of worms that have been opened up, and I aim to point every one of them out.
Yes.
Could you give us a chance to have the Public Works and the manager speak to this, so maybe the manager first?
I'll do it. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So Mr. Dunn did raise this issue. I'm going to try to run through 5 or 6 points in response. I think this council was here when we did realize we had some private streets that were never accepted, never meant to be city streets, that the city had been maintaining, and at least in my 5 years here, and Councilor Bear knows this well, Barbara Boulevard and a couple of streets in that neighborhood. If you recall, a couple of weeks ago, Wes had brought to the council, to my attention, we brought to the council over Tremont Street, which needed to be paved, and that's in the connecting road in between Pleasant and North Main, significantly in the urban core, had never been formally accepted. So this was part of some diligence that Wes has been doing, and doing a great job of identifying some of these streets that are in limbo, if you will, as to their classification. We do have a very comprehensive document coming to you for your January 9th meeting that identifies a number of streets, so that we just weren't singling out Garfield Street Extension in this particular case, but a number of streets that either are private and we shouldn't be maintaining because state law clearly identifies that no public funds shall be used to maintain private street. And I think to Mr. Dunn's point that he plows, he paves, he repairs potholes, it's clearly not a city street, otherwise the city would be obligated to be doing all of that. I will look it up and check with our legal counsel. I'm not aware that just because we've been doing something for a period of years, we're required by law to do that. But I will review that with the city attorney and get back to you on that. But I'm not aware of anything specific along those lines. So we did, and I will say that if we had planned on doing this and knew there were a number of streets, we certainly would have intended to give notice prior to doing that. So on that, I do say that, we should have in hindsight, and for that, I don't disagree with him on that point. We kind of fell upon it late in the season when we were just doing Tremont Street.
Yes, Council.
So just in terms of the notice aspect of this, and given the situation that Mr. Dunn describes, at least until we resolve the issues that you got to research, can we provide a notice period?
He has known about it for a few weeks, and if the council would like, we could extend a period for another week or two so we could line up someone else to do salting and sanding. But it's not like you just found out yesterday. He has known about it for a couple of weeks, if that's the council's desire. But again, the state law indicates we should not be doing something on a private street, and we don't believe this is a situation where the city had always intended to accept this and had just not gotten around to it in a housekeeping error, so to speak. In regard to the trash, though, it's the same thing. Trash trucks do not go down private streets and pick that up. And I think Mr. Dunn has clearly identified that he knows it's, he said a couple of times, my road, my private land. He did come into my office the other day and indicate that he gave me a verbal no trespass order, and he indicated that he thought it was valid to be able to give that verbally, and I accepted that, and I spoke with Wes, and from that point on, I said, we shouldn't be accessing the property, so I do agree with that. In regard to the assessment, all properties, within their deed, they're listed whether they're on a private street or public street, and assessed values reflect, what kind of street they're on. There are a number of private streets in the city that don't get city services, and their assessment, in part, is based on sales data, and sales data is driven by the market as to how properties are valued. So the assessment, in that sense, is fair, and it reflects what streets are doing. So we do have a comprehensive list coming to you on a number of fronts for the January 9th meeting.
Is Garfield Street on that?
I believe it will be, yes.
Yes, okay.
But this was one that was identified sooner, and I say Mr. Dunn has known about it for a couple of weeks. We accepted his order not to trespass, and we have not been trespassing since that point. And I don't know if I necessarily have done the math and agree with his math. It seems like a pretty small number, and I know that salt is a lot more expensive than sand, so when there's combinations of a salt-sand mix or straight salt, those certainly do the numbers. But the bigger picture is, state law doesn't allow public funds to be spent. The liability of us going onto the property and not having the state law to back us up from our insurance carrier, the question's going to be, why are you performing some kind of maintenance on a private road? And that's part of the bigger picture on this.
Yes, Counsel.
So, in terms of the description of the road, Garfield Street to the point that's highlighted in yellow, what's the difference between the quality of road that makes it accepted up to that point versus the part that Mr. Dunn is?
I haven't looked to see how that street was built, whether it conforms to city specs for putting heavy trucks on it, trash trucks, in particular. He brought up the police and fire and ambulance. Again, there's a number of private streets that it's the owner's responsibility to be maintaining. I mean, city services, the emergency services will attempt to get there, but it's the responsibility of the private property owner or owners to maintain the street so that emergency services have the best chance of getting to them.
Yes.
Thank you. If I may just follow up with that, this road that I constructed is equivalent or better than to the rest of Garfield Street, and that's not by my standards. Many people have come up, and just through discussion, I illustrate to them that it's a private road, and they simply cannot believe it. They say, you got to be kidding me. So I'm just stating.
Sure.
Yes.
So I guess, is the shortest way to home here with respect to addressing the concerns and our legal risk management issues, evaluating whether that road can be an accepted city street? I mean, your family's been in that business of paving for...
Well, that, I'm sorry, Counselor, is not an option here.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying if you've already built it to that point, my point isn't saying doing something else, is there a way to get that part of the street accepted?
That's what I'm saying, Counsel, that's not an option. I will never accept
Don't want
it.
it, okay.
As long as I live, it'll be a private road.
Okay.
That takes care of it.
So you understand you...
Under RSA 231:59A, it has provisions for emergency lanes. Now, the municipality has an obligation to keep emergency lanes open, such as fire, emergency vehicles, and I think that would be an alternate resolution to this case. I'm not really much in the mood for discussing, anything with, I haven't had it several weeks. It's been dropped upon me on the 18th. I don't know, maybe that's a little over a week. But just when you have a foot of snow and then it's a glare ice, not even to be notified, is totally improper and unprofessional. I always thought more of the city, and I emphasize, none of my frustration is directed at this board, to the councilors. It's, just the actions that were taken. I don't think that any of you had any direct doings in this. I don't know, but...
So, if I could...
Yeah, go ahead.
It seems like in terms of the the reconciliation of the one part of RSA that says you can't versus the part that Mr. Dunn cites, that you're going to research that point as what?
No, and actually, we've researched on the number of streets. We do have some that we're bringing to you for emergency lanes. An emergency lane on a private road typically means there's of value to the city in order to be more productive or be more deliberate. So I'm probably not saying it right, but we've got a private road that connects two long dead-end streets. And by declaring that an emergency lane with the property owner's permission allows our trucks to continue to make the turn and connect to another street in order to be more productive in our plowing, as opposed to getting down to an end and having to back up a significant distance. Where this one dead ends, without having a chance to research it, my gut would say does not meet the definition of an emergency lane because it's dead-ending and it's not providing a benefit to the city for the purpose of connecting through and utilizing it. So we're bringing some streets which we're saying are private. We're bringing a very small number, I believe, that have worked with property owners and with their permission would get an emergency lane designation because of that connectivity or value above and beyond. And then there'll be some that should have been accepted city streets, had always intended to be city streets, for whatever reason had not been.
Yes.
Thank you, Counselor. I'd just like to state that there is more than just what Manager Myers the city manager is discussing with emergency lanes. It's not just connecting two roads together. If you look at the state law, it is exactly as he said, beneficial to the city. Now, is it better to turn around at the bottom of a severe hill and have your trucks be wandering around on private property, turning around, creating a hazard, or traveling up 350 feet to a 65-foot radius turnaround that's totally flat with no pose of any traffic or danger in front of my garage? It just, and if you want to argue with the cost, yes, they do apply some salt there. I only care about it being sanded, but they have to mix it and it's applied with it. I don't care if you double it, call it $3. Hell, I don't care if you call it $50. I can make a donation to the city. I think that something has to be resolved here, and I would like to state that Mr. Myers' ample time of a week or so, 10 days, the town of Center Harbor was so gracious with their people and their taxpayers to give them 2 years. 2 years to make other means once they came up with the discontinuing of the care. So I thank you for your time, and again,
We'll wait and see what the city manager comes up with. You're going to give us a reading on that.
Meanwhile, what do the 3 residences there on the hill do with their trash? How do you get the mail? The mail truck hasn't come up. This is a discontinuing of many services and stuff. I have a premonition. I've been able to forecast the future, many people have told me, and I predict here that the city is going to continue sanding this road, or I'm going to receive a hell of a reduction on the taxes on 3 homes. Thank you.
Yes, Council.
Just to clarify one point on your assessments, Mr. Dunn.
Yes.
I live in Briarcrest. There are 240 homes there. We do not get plowing, we do not get sanding, and we do not get trash pickup. Our assessment is the same as the rest of the city. So it isn't somebody that's picking on one particular, it's the same assessment But when you go
Well,
and
that is
choose to live
disproportionate,
in a-
Counselor Beer, and you should bring that up with the assessors.
No, it's not.
Be-
Southdown is the same thing. You just have certain areas, they know when they buy that they're not going to get these services.
That generally makes the property, I'm not going to argue this, I'll argue it with the assessors, but it normally makes the property less valuable when you don't have, trash pickup or city plowing or road maintenance and sanding. I understand that Briarcrest is that was built and constructed, and they do their own maintenance and what have you. I think it's a totally different situation myself there, but...
Okay, well, we will wait and see what the city manager comes up with the
Okay.
Public Works Director, and, yes.
I guess in a week or two period here while we're sorting through this, can we continue to do what we had been doing practically?
I would like to have a date certain, if that's the council's, I would like, to be the full consensus of the council to do it, and a date certain when we're going to stop. And since I've stated here publicly that state law does not allow that, and I've let you know that, and also potential with insurance, and we're now on private property, we haven't assessed the condition of that street. Was to say there's not going to be a concern over our truck did damage to something there. There are concerns about us continuing it, knowing that it's a definite private street, and in fact, that we don't plow it, we don't pave it, we don't fill the potholes on it. I have serious concerns that I want to make you aware of.
Again, as a reminder, there's been 42 years the city trucks and trash trucks have been going up there. The road has broken up at times, and I have resurfaced it without an inquiry or a complaint to the city whatsoever. I take the full responsibility. I'm not one to go looking for something for nothing. And like I said, if there's some resolution that you feel we could come up with, an emergency lane alleviates your insurance policies, problems. Many other towns have done it, and as I said, it's for the benefit of the municipality, not just to cross from one road to another, as Mr. Myers illustrated.
Okay, well,
So I guess I'm just trying to help someone here if we can help them, in terms of took the time to come in and raise the concern. I guess from my standpoint, if we in fact have been doing it, whether it's 42 years or 26 years, whichever, can we get some sort of release to satisfy the concern over damages while we work through the policy issue that you're bringing to us, which is what you said on the 9th.
On the 9th, yes.
So I guess, insofar as that we know we're having a major storm, probably on Thursday, can we get some sort of release from you to, in terms of road concerns that the manager discussed as a temporary basis to sort of work through this, to try to, in good faith, there may not be in the end something we can do based on our insurability situation and what the statutes, and you've pointed to a couple things that we can consider and that you can bring back to us in more detail, but I understand the risk of sort of the practical legal risk versus just trying to.
I would not hesitate to do that. That would be fine. Just for your reference, the city single-axle trucks have never posed a threat and stuff to the roadway. The tandem axle rubbish removal trucks, occasionally in the spring, there's 2 or 3 weeks where it's the frost is coming out, there's road limits on some of the back roads of the city and town, and I've never stopped the trucks from coming up, and they do tweak it a little bit, but they've never heard from me and never will. I take care of it. And I just wanted one last point. In my discussion on the telephone with Mr. Anderson, as I stated, is very distasteful to me, and I have to bring this to the board. You know,
I think you
no,
have, but
well,
already.
no, I haven't, sir. Thank you, Mr. Lippman. He stated, again, like I said, that none of his men have any recollection of ever going up there. Well, my home surveillance camera, I'd be glad for you all to sit down and review that and watch the trucks come up, and I'll provide the popcorn if we watch that. And if you care to talk to the city truck driver, Jeff Miller, who states to me, we've always done that. That would be a good point to start if you care to. So I don't appreciate this type of, thank you.
Okay, so, yes.
I kind of go along with Henry, probably till the next meeting, which would be January 9th, so we could get the information on what was brought up here tonight, and maybe ask Public Works to continue whatever they've been doing or not doing till that point. And then on that night, if things come together as has been said, that about the private roads and things like that, which we've been looking at for a long time, actually, then on that night, then if that's where it comes down, then we would discontinue doing that to your private way on that night. So basically, you have 2 weeks also to maybe set up something to be sure, one way or the other, that you'd have people taking care of your property if you're not going to be around for the winter, you know what I'm saying?
Well, that's the problem I'm faced with, Counselor Hamel. My wife and I, tomorrow at this time, will be sitting under a palm tree sucking on margaritas and stuff.
Sounds good. Now, the other thing that was brought up about signing a release, can you do that before you leave, or you said you're leaving tonight?
Yes.
If I can, Counselor, knowing that we've stated that this is a private road and acknowledging that we have concerns about conditions and about a no trespass, I am telling you very clearly, I'm not comfortable with signing anything tonight until I bring the legal counsel into it.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying to sign it tonight.
So,
No.
I'm sorry, I thought I heard you just say,
No,
could
no.
he sign something
No, I said
tonight?
he's leaving tonight.
Okay, I am even more concerned now about not doing anything until we have legal counsel where we know it's a private road. He's admitted it's a private road. He's not interested in working for the process of trying to make it accepted. His own word said that will never happen as long as he is here. I truly want to make sure that this is, if it can be done properly for a time certain, that it is done with legal counsel. And I would ask that, I very strongly encourage that we make no promises tonight other than you give me direction to speak with legal counsel tomorrow to see if there's an opportunity that we can do something on a temporary basis that protects the city.
And I request that while Mr. Myers is at it, he checks with Counselor on precedents with 42 years of provided service. That is a big fact right there, the precedents. Thank you.
Will.
Okay. So, can you do that?
If that's the will of the council, I'd be happy to do that tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we need a motion for that?
No.
Unless there's any dissenting opinion, I'll take that as consensus.
Okay. We'll take a look at it and
Okay.
see what happens.
Thank you very much for your time, and I wish everybody a happy new year.
You too.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else from the audience that's not on the agenda tonight? I guess not. Little paper's all set, enough? Okay. Interviews, we don't have any communications, we don't have public hearings, presentations, mayor's report, we don't have committee reports. We don't have any. Did you want to set up a meeting?
I think on House expansion of the veterans tax credit, did we want to
Yes.
set up a meeting?
Want to do it for the second meeting in January?
I think that's fine.
Was that the 23rd,
23rd, yes.
before council meeting, Henry?
if we could. 6:30 on the 23rd.
Half hour? You think that's enough?
It may take more than one meeting to get through it.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think we could probably
It'll raise questions.
raise
Yeah.
questions in a half hour's time, and then
Okay.
So you have a 6:30 meeting on the
23rd.
23rd of
That's a
January.
Finance, yeah.
And is there any additional information that you'd like me to compile? I know I gave you the approximate numbers and the impact and the copy of the law that states we've got to do it the same level as
Same
we're
amount
doing
as the other.
currently. So I don't need to know the answer tonight, but if there's anything that any of you think of between now and the week before the 23rd that you want to make sure I have for background or get to you ahead of time, just please let me know.
I guess it would be good if you had any information through the municipal association on what, I mean, it's sort of the way the statute's currently constructed, it's either all or nothing is what you've advised.
Yes.
And I think some towns are even considering having legislation proposed to look at sort of a phase-in
There's at
approach.
least in one LSR by title only at this point that we don't have the background information on, but as soon as that information becomes available, I'll be happy to get the details of any pending legislation that may be impacting this about a possibility of a phasing-in period or an opportunity to do it at a different level and gradually get there type of thing.
So we'll have we have an estimate on what the value of that credit would be, understanding that there's no perfect way to estimate it. And then if we could get a sense of what other communities in our immediate geography and what
Okay.
major cities are doing, and
Yep.
be good to know.
Okay. I think a lot of towns in our area, it'll be at their town meeting.
Right.
Depending on what type of town they are. So
Or,
I think
yeah.
it's coming on a few as far as maybe a warrant article type of thing to do that. So I'm not sure that, other than cities where the city council would be doing it, or maybe the couple of towns that are town councils,
Yeah.
I think this spring is the first opportunity for
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
towns who aren't councils to be acting on it, so we may not have a lot of information for you yet, but I'll put together what I can
If
for
you
you.
phase it in, does that,
You're not
You
allowed to.
can't
under
phase it in.
current law.
No,
well,
it's
I
gotta
thought you
be-
just said you could check
No.
into that.
No.
No, well, there might be legislation that gets filed in order to offer an approach to phase it in.
So if you accept it, it's the full thing right away?
That's where it's at right now, yes.
Could you, I'm not sure what I did in my paper, but could you have another one of those?
Absolutely, yep.
Thank you. Might be right here, but
Okay. Anything else on the councilors? That's it. Next on the agenda is citizen comments, requests for current agenda items. I don't see anybody out in the audience, so I guess we don't have any of those this time. Managers report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. So we have wrapped up the construction season, other than doing a couple of final things on Lakeside Avenue to get things buttoned up before winter fully sets in, which is looking like Thursday afternoon. But during the winter, obviously, we're working on the Lakeside project. At least the conduit is in place for the utilities to be pulling lines. There's work going on the Winnipesaukee River Basin. As I had updated you about 4 or 6 weeks ago, the communities have sent a letter to the AG's office asking for clarification as to if assets were to be transferred, is it done for $1, or is there expectation that there would be a greater amount? We have not gotten an answer back on that yet. We're working on some of the engineering for some of the sidewalks that we got through the TAP grant, which is a federal grant, and the federal year starts October 1st, so that's when that money became available, so we're working on the engineering to do a couple of final phases of the Riverwalk, and then also some sidewalk improvements in the area of Woodland Heights and in the area of the middle school down in Opeachy Street. So that design and engineering work will be going on during the winter in anticipation of next construction season. Same thing with the Weirs Beach restoration. We've got some final numbers, or engineering designs, I should say. We're reviewing those with DES, and our expectation is to have an update to the council here at a council meeting early in 2017, more than likely at one of the February meetings going forward. Kind of at a standstill on some of the shovels in the ground, so to speak, but still a lot of work. The tennis courts over at Levitt Park Park. The fence is down, the asphalt's torn up. We'll be going out to bid this winter so that as early as we can get an awarded bidder in there to start performing that work on the tennis courts. And again, Memorial Park, might be some punch list items to take care of in the spring on the irrigation system. I know we got to put the backflow in the meter, but the bulk of the irrigation system is in the ground over there. We have scheduled the auditor to present our annual audit for the first meeting in February.
Correct.
Which is
February 13th.
February 13th.
It's a bad number.
No, it's a
Well, it'll be
Monday.
good news, Monday, the 13th. So we'll have the auditor
Is
coming.
that during the meeting, or?
Yes, yeah, it'll be right at the beginning of the meeting, probably under presentations.
So they're doing the audit now, or done it?
The audit is complete, and we're just wrapping up.
They've got a draft copy to us with the backup information. We're going through it to make sure that we're in agreement with everything they've done. We were hoping to actually do it on January 23rd, but there was a scheduling conflict with Scott McIntyre, who was presenting, is not available that night, so we pushed it to the first meeting in February.
Okay.
Can, the Woodland Heights project for the sidewalks and things, so we've discussed this before, what are they going to be, what do they want to do up there?
I'll have to pull out the specific details. I don't have them in front of me tonight, but I'd be happy to go over it with you.
Okay.
I know you had a concern.
Well, there was concerns on a sidewalk on Stephen Street, and then I thought, we were thinking at the time of putting in that platform speed bump up at the other end of Winter, and I've heard concerns about that, and I'd like us to look at maybe doing, there's a crosswalk there, and I guess the idea is people aren't slowing down for the crosswalk. If we could put like what we've did on Highland Street with the flashing yellow lights with the solar thing at that crosswalk,
Why don't I
which would make it visible more than, I just don't think that speed bump there is a good idea, but, I mean, that's just my opinion.
All right. Well, why don't I get the specifics? You and I can set up a time to go over it, and then we can, if you want, set up a public information meeting where we can lay out the plans and make sure everyone's on the same page before we get too much further.
Well, that's why I'm addressing, you mentioned you
I don't have them with me, and I
designed it
can't-
over the winter, so that's why I'm bringing it up now.
I can't speak
I hear you.
anyone intelligently to that project at the moment.
No problem.
Council Lippman.
If I could ask the manager a question. With respect to the Winnipesaukee River Basin and the opinion being sought, is the opinion based on that, the direction that the group wants to go? Just my strategy question is if we take full responsibility for it locally, does it prejudice our ability to potentially, as a state and a local area, to attract funds? I mean, if you look at how that was built originally, it was, a large portion of it was federal money. If we take ownership of it, does that compromise our ability to tap into certain financing so that?
Especially
becomes-
state.
Well, I don't think it does, and you're right. It was mostly federal money, and that's our conversation with the state, is it wasn't that the state laid out millions of dollars to go in there. And since it's been constructed, it's all local dollars that are going in for the operation and any of the repairs. So I don't think this reduces our chance of qualifying for grants that are out there. Anytime we have opportunities in partnering with the state to apply for federal funds, we're certainly doing that. I think the reason the question is being asked right now is because if the answer comes back from the state saying, sure, the communities can work towards a local utility oversight group, but you have to come up with $20 million to buy the assets, that might end that conversation right on the spot. So before we got too far down the path of how would the governance structure look like and what's it going to be comprised of, we thought that was a very important question to get answered, because that might be a deal breaker depending on what the answer is. So that was the reason for the question. But before we get into any new governance structure, it's got to come back to all the communities for, majority approval to go in and do that, so.
There's 16 communities?
I don't think it's as high as 16. I might want to put the
Or
number
11?
around 11?
11?
10 or 11?
11.
Couple of very small ones.
They all pretty much in consensus?
find
I'd say a very strong majority are, and there's one or two small communities in I think Samberton would fall into that category, and the Tilton Northfield has a sewer district as well. They don't have a whole lot of users, and I think they're concerned about,
What their share.
are they going to be a small pond in a big entity, and they really don't have a lot of customers hooked into the system. So one part of the discussion is they would still be connected to the system, but they might just be almost like a corporate customer of the system. So they would still, they'd be almost like we are in Laconia. If you have sewer, you're part of the Laconia sewer system, and you pay a monthly or a quarterly sewer bill. So for a couple of the small ones, if there was concern about the fact that they're really small and their vote doesn't carry a lot of weighting, and they didn't want the hassle or the aggravation maybe of having to have a representative go to that board, there's probably an opportunity for them collectively to be a customer of the system, and they would pay their proportionate share of any cost and that type of stuff. But the Meredith, Belmont, Guilford, the Bay districts, which is Center Harbor and Moulton Borough and something else over there, I think, or maybe just those two.
Yeah.
All are strongly leaning in looking at moving this forward, at least to get the answers and then bring it to the governing bodies individually as far as communities, and see what the will of the powers that be are.
Are they looking to take it out of state hands or control, or is that what?
Yes, the feeling is right now, this is the only wastewater operation that the state runs, and it's Department of Environmental Services. They're in a regulatory role. They're not
they
meant to
don't.
be operating. So, and this is not a knock against the state. They've been a good partner, good communicator, but is the skill set there, is the right, we need to work within the state hiring guidelines. So if a certain position and classification doesn't exist, we're hiring an administrator 3 or an administrator 4 to run the plant because that's a position
the state.
that exists in the state personnel policy and the classification plan. Is there a different skill set that we need who maybe is looking to run it more like a business and look at, increasing our efficiencies and reducing cost? And again, this isn't a knock at the state, it's just, it's very unique that this is the only one that DES runs in the entire state, and there are some great examples of some regional wastewater cooperatives in New England who do it pretty well. So, for those reasons, we're exploring the options.
Okay, yes.
Just one thing, I know that when I was working a while back on the SEDS, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy for Lakes Region Planning Commission and BEDC at the time, that there's certain, by completing that plan, there's certain infrastructure monies that we're eligible for, and I don't know if any of those fit within that, but that might be something to research with respect to future capital.
I will make a note of that and check it out.
Okay.
We have one other thing, Scott.
Some of these guys
Would it
are-
be, would it be possible, I don't know if the next meeting or the meeting after, but I would like to, at least by the meeting after the 23rd, if we could have Belknap County Economic Development Council come in and kind of give us information of where they're at with the Colonial on their fundraising and the progress towards the rebuilding of the theater. In other words, we have money in the game as far as the city and the council and them, and I think we would like to know where they're at on the project, if it's on time, the whole, like to have them come in and give us a briefing on where they're at.
We actually have them scheduled on the 13th, just because the, January 13th, the closing, our loan to them right now was due for January 17th payment date.
13th?
The 9th.
I'm sorry, the
9th.
9th, January
Okay.
9th, my bad. I was thinking February 13th, which we were
Okay,
talking.
yeah.
So January 9th. Our loan due from them is for January 17th, and the closing with Muskoma is going to be a little bit after that. So one of the items that we wanted to bring them in and just discuss is extending that for a short period of time till early spring, in order to do that closing. So we're going to have Justin Slattery, Jack Dugan, and I believe Randy Eifert all here, so I can
Okay,
certainly
so they
let
can
them...
give us the total picture of
I
where
can
they're
certainly let
at
them
and
know
where
that
they're
you're
going.
looking for an overview of current status of the project as well.
Okay, if by delaying that and extending it, is there any risk of, through Mascoma, of losing the,
No, Mascoma's fully on board. I think it was just my understanding, and I'm probably not going to say this 100% correct, but I think the level of details in the actual architect and construction end of it was not quite yet to the point where Mascoma had all the details to know exactly how it was all going together and the itemizing of the cost, and therefore Mascoma has asked for that detail to be complete before they want to close, just to make sure that they've got the complete picture of it. So, but Mascoma is still very excited about the project and is looking forward to being a partner with the city.
I'd just like to have them come and give us a briefing on the whole thing.
Okay, I will give them that heads up. If you have any specific questions, so we can make better use of anybody's time, if anybody has anything, get them to me now.
Well, I'd like to know is what progress has been made on the drawings, on the engineering, and where we're at, when you're
Okay.
going to start.
All right, and if you had any specific beyond that, get them to me, and that way, at least if they know them ahead of time, they can be...
Want to see a time frame.
Okay.
Thank
I
you.
will make sure we do that.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay, new business. Request to remove the stop sign at Holman Street at the intersection of Shore Drive. And we have Wes Anderson here, our Public Works Director. If he would come forward and go through that with us, please.
The reconstruction of Holman Drive this past summer gave us an opportunity to do some traffic study and determine if that stop sign was needed. Prior to the reconstruction, basically it was a yield intersection. Shore Drive came in at a very slight angle, so it was truly a yield intersection. As part of the reconstruction, we turned it into a full 90-degree, which meant the traffic coming up Shore Drive had to stop, which provided a safer configuration. So we did a traffic study to see if the intersection met the warrants for a stop sign. And basically, the requirements are 6,000 average daily traffic a day. We're at 1,600 for it. Basically, the second piece is, what's the traffic accident history? All the accident history is all associated with the earlier design, not the current design. So that's really not applicable in this case. And those were the two main warrants in regards to it. So there's really, from a standpoint of traffic analysis, there's no requirement for that stop sign on the Holman intersection. There is still a requirement for the stop sign on Shore.
So you're looking to change it from a three-way stop
Up
to
to
just one?
one-way stop.
On Shore Drive coming up.
The other piece to it is, we also had them look at speed control to see, what was the impact right now of it. Although stop signs aren't supposed to be used for speed control, it gives us a pretty good idea over all the length of Holman Drive what our speed is. As engineers, we talk to 85th percentile, because you're never going to slow everybody down. So what we want to get is 85% of the traffic or is going what speed and less. And it turns out that for that configuration that we have right now, the 85th percentile is 31 miles an hour. So we're right at the target speed.
With the stop sign.
With the stop signs, but we did a long distance away from it, too. So realistically, the stop signs aren't really controlling the speed limit, or those who are going to obey the speed limit anyways. From that standpoint, the staff's recommendation, it doesn't meet warrants, the traffic control situation is appropriate, and the speed limit situation is appropriate. We recommend removing the stop signs on Holman Drive.
Yes, Counselor.
I'm just curious, what community or neighborhood input have you sought?
Haven't in this particular case, because what we're looking at is from, really, if you look at the warrants, it says from a traffic engineering standpoint, it should be an engineering study to it. We did that.
I'm hearing the technical part. but
Right.
This is people's neighborhoods, and so I guess, it isn't costing us anything to have a stop
We-
sign there.
right.
I just would like us to make sure that we're not going to spend 3 or 4 meetings afterwards, like we have in other spots, undoing something just because we haven't got the public input.
Well, they've been using it as the new way right now, haven't they, for a while?
Correct, but it's still, when we converted over, we basically kept the three-way stop as it is.
It's still there.
It's still there.
So I guess what I'm asking is if we can get some community input on, neighborhood input on removing that stop sign as to, you know, the 15% perception is maybe maybe from an engineering standpoint, an adequate standpoint, but it may not be from a public standpoint.
Well, I know Counselor Bounds can't be here tonight, but he had asked me to see if we could refer this to the Public Safety Committee, just so we could have a hearing, we could get a public input.
Well, have we heard anything from the public at all?
I'm not sure they're aware of this, other than it being on the agenda tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it got heavy press coverage about removing a stop sign. One suggestion, there is a homeowners association that covers, I won't say it covers on the stretch from Gale into that, where that stop sign is, so the first maybe 8 or so houses I don't think are a part of the association, but I know it encompasses Ashwood and Holman from the stop sign down probably to
Warehouse.
a little beyond, maybe not quite to Blueberry Lane, but close, and probably Shore Drive down, halfway in between the two beach associations. Approximately 160 houses are in there. I know they have a newsletter, and I can't guarantee how many people have put their email address and subscribed, but I would think the strong majority of them had. I could certainly reach out to see if they could put something in there into a blast, which at least would get to those number of people, and see if there's any collective input they may want to provide.
Michael will take care of it.
That sounds good.
So maybe we do that as a step and not just schedule a whole meeting, public hearing. I mean, if we can capture the majority of those 160 houses in an email, maybe we can just ask the officers of that association if they'd be willing to collect whatever
How would they
feedback.
get
and
back to Public Works or back to the City Hall? or-
The president of the association is very active. I think if they set it out and
Relates.
collectively said, she would either could approach me or Wes or a combination of us and say, here's the general feeling of it, type of thing. So if you'd like, we could maybe just table it tonight, and I'd be happy to see if that route works, and we can get back to you with any response. And that still wouldn't preclude anybody from coming
And
to the
speaking.
meeting in 2 weeks and speaking on their own during items that are on the agenda.
Do we need that then in a motion, or just,
I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads, but if you want to make that a motion, just so that we're going to have a motion to table anyway, but if you want to say
Yeah,
motion,
right.
motion to
Yeah.
table pending the manager making some outreach in the manner as described.
So moved.
Yep, like he said.
we have,
Making the motion,
Yep.
I'll second it.
Was that to table to January 9th?
yeah,
Yes,
Table of January 9th.
please.
Pending the outcome,
To be continued.
to be continued.
okay.
So I think you need to take a vote to table at that point. A motion's been made
All
and
in
seconded.
favor of tabling? Motion carries 5 to, that was 5, wasn't it?
I was first, he was 2. One. I don't know, do you count?
Was
You're
it?
the mayor.
Yes, he
Okay.
does.
And
Yeah.
pro tem,
He could vote.
we can vote.
We
I
went
always
through
Thanks,
ask
Wes.
before.
Yeah,
We went through this once before, you do get.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Okay, next is unfinished business.
none?
City-owned property on Elm Street. I think that's not in a big hurry right now. I believe we can just leave that as it is. Council comments. Any council comments?
Happy New Year.
I'm sorry, I'm too talkative tonight, but the packet included something on the master plan. Is that for just reference, or are we going to have a discussion on that?
Counselor Bounds had asked for that, and he was going to bring up
Yes.
something, not in depth, but as the council representative to the planning board, he wanted to at least have you have it in front of you to go over just a couple of quick highlights. We are scheduled for January 9th to have a little bit more of an in-depth discussion about
Very nice, very nice.
Big
Yeah.
night, bring your sleeping bag.
So it's the 23rd.
So that was the reason it was in the packet, it was on Counselor Bounds' request.
Thank you.
But if you can hang on to those hard
missed our
copies,
goal.
I'm sure we'll be referring
We
to
missed
them.
our time goal. Yeah.
Okay, I don't see anything else. Council comments? I just want to wish everybody a Happy New Year, and do we have a motion to adjourn?
So,
Do we have a second?
So moved.
Yes, you did.
All in favor? Say
Aye.
Let's do that.
Opposed?